Today's guest on Empire Radio Sounds is Charlie Vatalaro, a saxophonist, woodwind specialist, arranger, among many other talents that he has, from our local 518 area. I first heard of Charlie back in the day when he was playing with a rhythm and blues band called Fat and Bad. Since then, I did get an opportunity in recent years to do a gig with Charlie at a New Orleans-style Mardi Gras fundraiser at RPI. In talking with Charlie, we found we had some similar experiences, such as being in military bands, playing bar gigs, etc. A quick friendship developed. Charlie has very generously listened to and encouraged my own musical compositions, which I am forever grateful for. Charlie was born and raised in the Boston area. He was a regular on the local club circuit by his mid-teens. His first big break came as a member of the Greater Boston Youth Jazz Ensemble, led by John Laporta. Following that, Charlie did a stint in the 18th U.S. Army Band, where he was a featured soloist on clarinet and saxophone, as well as staff arranger. After the Army, Charlie received a BA degree in jazz history from UMass Amherst and an MA degree in jazz techniques from Goddard College. Since then, Charlie has held faculty positions at the College of St. Rose, Schenectady County Community College, the University at Albany, and is an artist in residence at Hartwick College. Charlie was also the musical director and featured soloist with the late great blues legend Ernie Williams. Presently, Charlie is a saxophone artist in resident at the Hartwick College, Oneonta, New York, and the State University of New York at Oneonta, New York. He's also the leader of a popular local band collectively called The Oldies Show. This popular collection of musicians performs at places like the River Casino, Strock Theater, and many local parks. For today's listenings, we're going to listen to Charlie in a jazz setting, doing a rendition of the Flintstones, followed by Charlie in a more soulful setting, doing Georgia on My Mind. Please stick around after these listenings for an in-depth interview with Charlie Vatalaro.
The year was 1970, and the artist was Ray Charles, the incredible, the phenomenal Ray Charles. And Ray Charles recorded a wonderful Hoagie Carmichael tune called Georgia on My Mind. And as a tribute to Mr. Ray Charles, I'm going to do Georgia on My Mind.
Hello, welcome to Empire Radio Sounds. I am delighted to have you, Charlie Vatalaro, as my guest today. It's an honor to have you here today for a lot of reasons, but let me start with a question regarding the professional musician aspect of your career. You have a long time, you've been a saxophonist in our upstate New York area and in the Boston area, of course. And you have experienced the local club and bar scene evolve over a lot of years here. What would you say is different today from your earlier days in our 518 area for working musicians? This is a long question regarding gigs, types of music required to work, opportunities for saxophonists in particular.
Well, when I started, I came here a long time ago. I came here to teach at the College of St. Rose, and I was surprised when I got here. I was able to work almost right away. I was able to work pretty much when I got here, and that's because there were lots of places to work. There were just simply lots of places to work. And what I've often told my students is how I've seen it change in the 40 plus years I've been here now, is that I tell my students that there's no place to be bad anymore. I mean, there's simply no place to be bad. There's no, there used to be lots of gigs at least for me, there used to be lots of gigs at little tiny little bars and small clubs and hotel lobbies. I worked hotel lobbies and playing clarinet in hotel lobbies and playing saxophone with a pianist and that's where young people could start. And what sort of and to tell you the truth, when I first got here, there weren't I didn't know a lot of players, or a lot of people playing the saxophone. There was here at that time, there was catching work. There was Nick, of course, and Leo Russo, the elder, who was by the way, those, just as an aside, those two people were tremendous to me. They were wonderful to me. Another wonderful saxophonist, Paul Aldi, who was here. Paul was wonderful to me. But there were lots of places to play, and there were lots of things happening at the American Legion and things happening at the little social clubs and whatever. And so I could get out and I could play. I've seen it progress over the years where it got super specialized. People joined bands. You got in a band, and if you wanted to work, you had to get in a band. And for me, that's how I ended up in the wedding bands. That kind of work. That's where I sort of ended up playing. I never intended to play in wedding bands, and I was in wedding bands for 150 years. I mean, I was in there a long time.
You're not the only one. As my father used to say, you're not the Lone Ranger.
Oh yeah, I'm not the only guy that got into that. But that's how I saw it change. It became specialized almost.
That's interesting.
The other way I saw change is, for saxophonists a lot, it used to be that stock and trade, and this is not only here, but here I go being the old guy again. The skill sets changed. In a lot of ways, the skill sets changed. It used to be that you didn't work unless you knew tunes. You had to know tunes. Nobody waited around for you to flip through a book, and nobody had a real book, and nobody had any of that stuff. You worked if you knew tunes, and you could play them in different keys. And I worked a lot with with people who sang, with vocalists. I worked an awful lot with vocalists, and both in the Boston area and when I came here, that's the kind of work you would get. As it progressed through the years, it became super specialized. It was the jazz guys, and it was the blues guys, and it was
Okay.
and I guess people like me that had to hustle for a gig, you just, you put on whatever hat you had to put on.
Yeah, I agree. That's I had a similar experience here. I came here in 1973 from Germany. And long story short, I had a similar experience. Well, there was a lot of places to play. I used to play 4 or 5, 6 nights a week.
Yeah, I played a lot.
Yeah, I mean, long hours too, though. 6 sets, 40 on, 20 off.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, you kind of reminded me of things I've tried to blot out. There were lots of places to play. You could play consecutive nights.
Yes.
And you could play a lot if you wanted to, and had the horsepower. I'm not just blowing smoke because you're my friend. You're a great player, so you were going to work. You were going to work anyway. But the problem is for a lot of us, I would play a wedding in the afternoon. In the old days, I play a wedding in the afternoon, keep my eye on my watch because I had to be at the Chambers to play with David Ward and Fat and Bad.
Yeah.
And so you do 4 maybe, and remember I was doing cocktail hours too, because I was the only guy in those wedding band. A lot of guys, not the only guy, but I was one of the guys in the wedding band that could play tunes.
Yeah.
So a guy would get out and play the piano, and I play tunes for an hour before the wedding started.
That's a lot of saxophone playing.
And then I go and I play this thing, and then throw my stuff together. And, if I was, and then driver, if I was at the hotel, run across the street, go down the hill to the Chambers, and do 4 hours with David Ward. But you got better. Don't you think? Don't you think you got better? Playing makes you better.
I think that, and I think you really hit on something here with having to wear different hats. To go from a wedding gig and you wear your Stan Getz hat, then you go to David Ward, and you got to put on your King Curtis hat. For a sax player, it's a big jump for some sax players. Physically, it's hard.
Not everybody's doing that. You were thinking about doing that because you had that kind of concept, but not everybody was doing that. Here in this part of the world now, in this part of the world now, as I get older and I see the people, there's some really good players in this part of the world. There's some good, I'll only speak for saxophone players. There's some great saxophone players that are playing this part of the world. Right
here in upstate New York. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm talking right here in the capital region, this part of the world. There's some great players.
There are.
I still have contact through teaching with other players in other areas and all that stuff. And there are guys who don't change at all. They go to one kind of gig, they get hired to sub for a gig.
Okay.
And they go to that gig, and it's an R&B gig or something like that, and they're trying to impress somebody, so they're playing all their Coltrane sheets of sounds. Sure. They're doing all that stuff, and it just doesn't fit.
I know what you're saying.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they don't get hired again.
Yeah, this could be a whole interview right here. On this one subject. Yeah. Let me keep it moving, but to be reviewed later, maybe.
Sure.
On a technical note, how do you prepare as a saxophonist for different types of gigs? For example, now we just kind of covered this. One night is a jazz gig, and the next night, like you say, with David Ward, would be a funk gig. Mentally, how do you get yourself ready for one gig? Like I just alluded to, I wear my Stan Getz hat for a cocktail hour.
I go to school. I literally go to school and refresh. And I can tell you when I first got the Ernie Williams gig, and it was a blues gig, I went back to school, and God knows I had my training in the blues. That's for sure. My academic training in the blues. I had that. But I went back and reviewed, players, you mentioned King Curtis. I reviewed those players. I reviewed how they articulated, what they use for tonguing, what they use for phrasing. I tend to be a guy who tends to phrase long. If I'm improvising, I tend to phrase long.
Okay.
Problem, but I tend to phrase long. A lot of the Texas tenor guys and those kind of guys who played in those territory bands tended to have shorter phrases. I tried to spend time how they use their tongue. How hard was their tonguing? What was their vibratos like? What was their and what did they do with their sound? Did they edge their sound out? Did they smooth their sound out? That kind of thing. You were talking about the Getz thing. Well, the Getz thing is
a whole different
180 away from the King Curtis and so I kind of know that. I would know that, and kind of had that when I got the Ernie gig in the back of my mind, but I wanted to refresh. I literally wanted to refresh because when you play in a gig, you don't think that way a lot. You kind of react.
It's moving too fast.
Yeah. But with Ernie's gig for the first time, first month or so, I thought that way. That's how I prepared. Cool. I go to school. I go back to school.
Well, this is it's the wonderful thing about music is we're always in school. We're always learning, no matter how long we've been doing this. I still get excited when I hear I don't know, an R&B soul from the 1950s. I can't pick one out of my head right now, but it was so good the first time. I want to emulate some of that stuff, if that's the type of gig it is.
Yeah, for sure. For positively sure.
Okay, well, you've played as a sideman or in warm-up bands for some very big names over the years, ranging from Aretha Franklin to Tom Jones and a multitude of other players. I'm curious, you can answer this any way you want. I'm curious if these celebrities are easy to interact with, or is it more of a situation of being the hired hand of the night, stay out of the way?
I would add stay out of the way, hired hand, and shut up. It's pretty much.
You don't have to drop any names, just,
No.
It's how you survive, right?
Well, I know it's hard for jazz guys, and I will give myself that label for a while, I guess. It's hard for jazz guys not to think that the world entirely revolves around them at any moment. But no, your job is to support. That's your job. And I learned more from all the shows, and I did hundreds of shows, and that's no exaggeration, because I started in high school doing shows, which and I did shows when the artist was in a club, not in a theater. That's I learned from all the conductors that were there. The people conducting those shows in general are very skilled and are very musical, and they know exactly what their act wants, and they know exactly what they got to get from you. And they will, depending on the skill level, and depending on how long you're going to be there, they will talk about things like, all right, everybody, if you've got a sax section, everybody tone your vibrato down.
Okay.
It's his or her vibrato, not yours.
Okay.
I just kind of tell one story about.
Certainly.
I had one artist, a vocalist, who shall
we don't have to drop any names.
Remain nameless.
Okay,
and
that's fine.
A conductor who shall remain nameless.
That's fine too.
And this artist treated the conductor terribly, just terribly, and just had this whole thing going as a diva thing. And this artist it was in the Boston area, and this artist was really upset because the artist was going to do this sort of New England tour thing, this Boston, Worcester, Hartford
Sure.
kind of a thing, and wanted players from 802 New York, wanted New York players.
Oh, okay.
Did not want players from Local 9 in Boston. Didn't want those players. And proceeded to scream and yell and carry on about
Yeah.
how lousy we were compared to the
Really?
guys that I hadn't taken the horn out of the case yet. But how lousy we were compared to and anyway, and everything was wrong for this poor conductor. Everything was wrong for this
Yeah.
guy. Quite often you don't have the artist in like initial rehearsals, but this time, because it was a short-term thing, we were there.
Yeah.
And tempo was too fast. Tempo was too slow. Cutoffs didn't happen enough. He's playing too loud. This guy is, and it was a 14-piece band. It was a pretty good sized deal. This person was a big name.
Sure.
So this guy got murdered. I mean, he got murdered in front of people he didn't know. And as a conductor, that's something that's horrible when that
Yeah.
he's trying to deal with us and she's killing him. Anyway, long story short, we get the last night of the gig, and he's had enough. He's going to quit. He's had enough. Game over.
Yeah.
He looks at us and he says, "You guys had enough?" And nobody says anything. He said, "Had enough," right? And everybody kind of looked at him. He says, "Here's what we do." He said, "I'm out of here." He says after this, he says,
Holy mackerel.
and this is, hopefully my musical friends watching this will get this, other people may not. He said, "Every bar after letter C is gone.
Oh, no.
Take out every bar after letter C." Well, I forgot how hard that is to do. I didn't, So it acted like a recording skipped.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And he just turned her around for the rest of the night. That's just,
Well, karma, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Come around, go around. If you're going to be nasty to people, I don't see how you can expect to get a good show out of them.
no, there's some good people. H.B. Barnum is a great conductor with Aretha. He's very musical. There was a guy named Nick Perito. I'm going to date myself now. Nick Perito was with Perry Como, and he was remarkably, this guy was like, he wasn't real. He was real good. And he was real musical. And he would get the best out of people every time.
There you go. And your point is well taken there. A good conductor will make the musicians, when you're on that side of it, want to play, want to give,
Yeah, what you did is you wanted to play for them.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
You
it does. Not necessarily for whoever.
You didn't care what happened. You wanted to play for them.
Yeah,
and they knew that, and that's how they dealt with it.
Well, okay. So to my next question, you attended UMass. What did you major in? And could you give us a sense of your experience and education from that time in your career at UMass?
Wow. Well, you and I have talked about this. UMass Amherst was by far it was the turning point of my life. And I know that sounds corny, and I know that sounds, overly dramatic, but it simply was. UMass Amherst, when I went there, I got out of the Army in 1969. And I went to UMass Amherst. Never intended to go to UMass. The only reason I went to UMass was that I had joined the Army from Boston, and I joined the Army, and the University of Massachusetts had a deal that if you had joined the Army while you were a part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you joined the Army, you got and you qualified academically, you got the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which was the flagship of the state system. You got it totally free. So I
Wow.
was getting to my GI Bill,
Nice.
plus I was getting everything totally free. And when I got there, it was the time when I got there I got there in the fall of 1969. It was that time in the world when you know this, but other folks may not. It was the time when all of the quote unquote jazz guys came into academia. Everybody came into academia. And when I was at UMass, Yusef Lateef was there, Archie Shepp was there, Max Roach was there,
Huge names
Billy
in the world
Taylor
of
was there.
jazz. Yeah, all big names in the world of jazz.
Were there to study with Roland Wiggins.
Mhm.
And if you don't know who Roland Wiggins is, you should, especially my jazz friends, should go look up Roland Wiggins.
Mhm.
Roland Wiggins was just the most remarkable teacher, a theorist, arranger, a human being.
Very important.
By far, that was a human being. And I shouldn't have been in the same room with those guys, let alone in the same program with those guys.
Hmm.
I got in a program called it was called Bachelor's Degree Independent Concentration, BDIC.
Okay.
And I could go, and I could go study with Dr. Wiggins, and he would then pick and choose all of the courses that he'd help me pick and choose all the courses that I would take to support my major. And I began as a jazz history major. And I literally was playing at the top of the campus, which was a hotel thing at UMass Amherst. I was playing at the top of the campus. I went and I auditioned and got the gig with these guys, and I playing at the top of the campus. And he came in, and I knew who he was because he was famous to me.
Okay.
And I wanted to study with him. And he said, I have Yusef Lateef studying with me. I've got Billy Taylor studying with me.
Wow.
And he looked right at me and he said, why the hell should you study with me? He said, and then he said something which stunned me. And he said, I just listened to you for an hour and I heard 8 other people. I don't know anything about you at all. And I just listened to you for an hour. And it took me a while to figure out what the hell he was saying. At that time, I was 22, 23.
Okay.
I wanted to be Dexter Gordon. And
I see.
I wanted to be, and I was playing little licks I learned in these little tunes that I was playing.
Okay.
And he said to me, if you decide you want to play like you, then come see me. If you want to play, he said, if you want to play like somebody else, he said, I'm not interested.
Wow, that's quite a
I studied with him for 4 years undergraduate and 2 years graduate school. He got me to the point where Yusef Lateef was one of the readers of my graduate work.
Nice.
I would play tenor with Billy Taylor.
Nice.
I mean,
what an experience.
And he taught me about things. He taught me that playing in the practice room didn't cut it. But learning about drama and poetry and music and learning how other people lived and going out and helping the community. He got me involved in helping adjudicated kids who had been in problems with the law.
Sure.
He suggested I go volunteer with those kids.
That's an incredible experience there.
He said he wanted me to be a sort of overall kind of person. And I learned more about me. I would study with him private lessons like that, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours a week. I would be in his, and he would send me off and say, I want you to spend time with insert name of famous jazz guy here. And I would call them on the phone and get their people and mention his name, and I would talk to those people for an hour and a half about
Nice.
phrasing and articulation.
Very nice. Yeah.
And he was good to me. He was very good to me.
Yeah, and your point's well taken. When a teacher can cut right to the chase sometimes. I studied with Nick Vignola when I was about 18. And he said, you only play in the key of G. And he was right, you know. And then the next thing he says, the piano in the room across the way, you need to start learning piano. And that's all I needed. I respected Nick so much that I just had to hear it, you know, and I did it from that point on. There's 11 other keys.
He was a world-class guy, and literally world-class. And I don't think, and this is going to get me in trouble. It's my first time. I think I'm going to get in trouble.
Well, I brought his name up first. We're talking about Nick.
I don't think he was as you know, as respected in his local hometown as he should have been.
Well, this is typical. They say. I mean, not to get too biblical, but if your sandals got dust, kick them off and move on. But you know, Nick had a long conversation with me one time when I got out of the Air Force, and I was doing a lot of soul searching, and it was on a gig down at Quintessence, as a matter of fact. And he told it to me. He says, you know, if this is the life you want, you're gonna have to go out on the road. You know, you can't just sit in this area. And you know, it was another, and this is by now, I was in my 30s or late 20s. You know, I'd already been in the Air Force, got back out, and you know, I had to do a lot of soul searching of what did I want out of life, because if I wanted to stay on the road, I probably would have stayed in the Air Force. And so I knew, you know, I had to do a lot of soul searching along those same lines that you're alluding to. But let me move on to our next question. Like I said, we could talk.
I just got to cap this, and that is that I don't think we realized what a world-class player and what a world-class impact Nick had on the jazz world. I think we knew he was famous, and I think we knew, you know, that, you know, he could, you know, we knew it was him and Pepper Adams. We knew that. Okay. Yeah. But I don't think we knew what an impact he had on just the jazz world and jazz saxophone playing in general. We just don't realize that.
His Barry play, and I don't think has been assessed for how good it was.
We should put a statue up to that guy. And I'm telling you that he's from here. Yeah, that's all.
From our area. Well, I hear you. And he always treated me wonderfully. When I was a kid, when I was out of the Air Force, I went to Paris one time and I had questions, and he had no problem, picked up the phone and, you know, chit-chatted for a while. So, okay, well, let me move on to your academic side of your career, because there's a lot here as well. In what ways has the world of digital technology changed or influenced how you go about teaching today from the early days of your teaching career?
Wow, that's huge. I taught for a long time. I taught everything from applied saxophone to orchestration and arranging to, I taught theory for a while. I taught whatever. And it's all of this stuff around us, all these little, you know, black boxes with the flashing lights and all the stuff I got in front of me is amazing. I can now sit with a student, and if we get talking about Nick, I can go to my phone and I can pull up recordings of Nick on my phone. You know, and when I started teaching, it was, you know, if you were lucky, it was, okay, here's your assignment. I want you to go to the library, see if they have something of Nick on vinyl, pull it out, a scratchy thing, and stick it on a turntable and listen to it. The library possibilities, the example possibilities, the ability for me to take my students in the applied world, being able to just do that is just remarkable. In teaching orchestration, and I haven't taught orchestration in a long time, but in teaching orchestration, it used to be gee, you used to have to drag students, people in a room who had this sight read your string quartet that had, that maybe they played it well, maybe they didn't, maybe they read all the notes, maybe they didn't, and if you had to make changes, you had to make them on paper with a pen. And now kids can come in a room and they can write for string quartet. They can have a virtual quartet play it, and they can make changes on the fly. Their instructor can literally, how much progress can you make as an arranger in that way? Because the only way you learn as an arranger is to arrange, be bad at it, and then arrange and get better at it. I mean, that's the only, and so this whole concept, and in some ways, I don't think students take advantage of it. I don't think they do.
It brings me right into my next question. Actually, this worked out well, because while we're on the subject of technology and arranging and stuff, I know you had a solid education and experience in arranging. Now, like you say, nowadays you can, and you've helped me a lot informally. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And most of everything has been digitally created except for the saxophone.
Yeah.
But it was much appreciated. But let me get to your arranging, my question about that. And who would you say are some of the most influential folks in the world of composing, arranging, whether it be for, say, Ray Charles and a big band or classical music? For your own work, I realize all this is very subjective, but one has to start somewhere.
Sure.
And quite candidly, like I said, you've helped me with this a lot.
Well, first of all, I was happy to help you because I think your work, and your playing and your compositions are quality, and I think as many people in the world should hear the work. And if I was able to give you a kind of a nicer framework to frame that work, then I'm honored to do that. So that's where we're at. Yeah, as far as the arranging concept goes, I'm pretty much a traditionalist. From my time with Dr. Wiggins, I spent a lot of time with Strayhorn and Ellington.
Okay.
A lot of time with Strayhorn and Ellington.
That's exactly
a lot of things with Strayhorn and Ellington. As a matter of fact, all of the things I learned in straight theory in college, because I had to take straight theory, not just jazz theory. I had to take straight. Right. A lot of the things I learned in straight theory about part writing and everything, Strayhorn and Ellington were breaking.
I mean, get it.
I mean, I don't want to get crazy here. I certainly understand Bach did the same thing. I certainly understand that Bach had more than three thirds. I understand that, and he had parallel octaves. I understand, but Ellington really flipped things around. Strayhorn especially really, flipped things around. That's where my interest and love of arranging really took off. I've been arranging forever. I've been arranging since high school, but I was bad at it, and I got better at it spending my time with Dr. Wiggins. From there, I moved on to Gil Evans.
Okay.
I love the sonority of Gil Evans. I like the texture of Gil Evans. And then from there, because of the nature of the work I was doing, I got into more of a show business kind of a thing. I got into Don Sebesky. Don Sebesky, as a matter of fact, has become the premier arranger now. I mean, if you watched the Oscars last year, most of the stuff, the orchestral things, were done by Sebesky. Okay. But I like Nelson Riddle. I like Don Costa, and by far for how I really learned about non-jazz instruments was spending time with the Mancini sounds and scores. Okay. I learned about French horns and double reeds and alto flutes and all that stuff. Then I sort of branched out. I sort of got into Toshiko Akiyoshi.
Okay, yeah.
Because she was married to, there's a little home thing. She was married to a wonderful she was married to she was married to Charlie Mariano,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and Charlie Mariano was from Boston, and he and Jimmy
Mhm.
Mosher Charlie Mariano and Jimmy Mosher were just gods to me when I was a kid growing
Okay.
up. They were
Yeah.
just, and by the way, kind of like Nick, they were awful nice to me, and not really appreciated as much in the Boston area. Yeah, and that's what I did to get tools, and then what I did after that, after I got tools, was to spend time listening. Did a lot of listening, and did a
Yeah.
lot of listening to stuff that I may not ordinarily listen to, if
Now-
that makes sense.
It does. And could I ask you, do you use the piano to work out these harmonies? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I use the piano, but again, I have the luxury of all of this stuff, all this, computer stuff. Like
Yeah.
I have a program called Sibelius,
Yep.
and I can put my score on a screen, and I can try voicings and slide
Yeah.
them around, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and do
I've had the
and-
same experience, and it opens
Yeah.
doors. It opens doors that you might
yeah,
not have
it does.
even
Yeah, it
thought
does.
about,
Yeah,
in that world of arranging, composing. And for me, the big problem is rhythm. I mean, I think that's harder than harmony, but
it just comes from doing, and this is a tip for all of my friends that are into arranging, especially when it comes to rhythmic figures. Don't overthink it.
okay.
Don't overthink it. Try to think of things in as larger blocks as eighths and six. If you've ever seen a computer when it transcribes a jazz rhythm, it comes out to, don't go there.
Yeah, right. It comes down to 64th notes.
I'll tell you, the whole thing about arranging is imagination, and jazz improvising the same. It's imagination. If you work behind someone who's a vocalist, and you have to play a figure for him or her to support him or her,
Right.
if you play that figure, you're arranging. You're literally creating a figure. You're
Interesting, yeah.
arranging. Now, if you're good at it as a player, the next time that tune comes, that part comes around again, you play the same figure.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, you're through composing. You're just, you're non-biased. You're just playing straight through something. But
Yeah.
if you're creating figures, then you're arranging. It's just a matter of taking those figures and dropping them onto the paper. And so when I arrange, I try to say, if I were playing, if I were playing instead of arranging, what figure would I be playing here?
Okay.
And that's how
I'm going to get to the questions about the two songs that we'll be playing after or before this interview, actually, but I want to ask you about them. In today's listenings, first we're going to hear a take that you played on the Flintstones TV theme based on rhythm changes, of course. And this is a question. How would you advise to tackle someone to learn how to play these very fast moving chord changes as a sax player or any other instrument for that matter when you're learning?
Are you posing a question to me about where does the spark for improvisation come from? Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, I guess where I'm leading with this is because the next song is a very soulful Georgia on My Mind, right? So we got two different things going on here. It kind of comes back full circle to the beginning of this interview. Rhythm changes, in my experience as a sax player, are very challenging because you really almost got, if you want to make every single chord change, you almost only got about 4 notes per chord. Da 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 da. So that's one way, or you could do the, but I want to ask you how you go about teaching rhythm changes to a sax player.
Well, I'll tell you. Here's the number 2 place where I'm going to get myself in trouble. Improvisation. I'll give you Charlie's definition of improvisation, which is not totally from me, but it's what I adhere to. Improvisation is a combination of intellect and intuition.
Okay.
Intuition is where did those notes come from? Where did that melody come from? what part of you cook that up and get spit out through your horn? Where does that happen? Louis Armstrong, you know, not arguably, you know, the greatest improviser of all time, because he taught us how to do that.
Yeah,
I don't think Armstrong ever thought about, okay, you know what? Flat five would be nice here.
yeah, I agree.
You know,
I concur.
he played from his life experiences and his emotions and from the stuff he learned from Joe Oliver, and he played that way. So that's the intuition part of jazz improvisation.
Gotcha.
There's an intellectual part of jazz improvisation, which is, okay, what are the chord structures here? What scales are suggested by those chords?
Yeah.
What, you know, what are the ingredients I can throw into the stew called my jazz improvisation?
Sure.
What can I do that? And you know, how much do I need to know? You know, how much do I need to know? If you know, how much do I need to know this stuff? And most young players want to be heavy on the intellectual side. They want to run around and go, you know what? I just blew on this chain. Let me tell you about this. You know,
guilty when I was younger, especially very guilty.
You know. Here's what I was taught. This is not from Charlie. This is what I was taught. You know, if you tend to be an intellectual improviser only, your stuff will tend to be stale and repetitive, because what happens is you're seeing some sort of 1, you're seeing some sort of 4, you're seeing some sort of 5, you're seeing some sort of trend. They're all the same, you know.
Yeah.
And so you have to. Now, I'm not saying that you can only be an intuitive player,
right?
Because if you go to play in a big band or whatever, and they put changes in front of you, you've never heard the tune before, you got to kind of know where people are going to go when you get there. But in general, I'm an emotional player. When I play that, the reason I gave you the Flintstones was because that was a day I was happy.
Okay, well, that's interesting, and I'm glad you chose it, because it is part of. I think all us young tenor players go through this thing of 1,000 notes in a second, right? And then even if you get somewhere close to that, it starts dawning on you, but nobody out there cares.
Oh, no, you know, and it's just, I was happy that day, and I literally, you know, I don't want to sound heady here, but you know, playing that quick is not a thing for me.
Well, you did a wonderful job on it, I got to tell you.
It's not a thing for me. What it was a thing for me on that cut was that I was happy. I just felt like playing tenor that day for no other reason other than I just felt like playing. Yeah. And that's what came out. I mean, that's what came out.
Well, I think before I get to the next question, and almost last question, I would just want to go back to what you said about Louis Armstrong. I would say, in my own personal opinion, there's 2 players that it seemed like there was never a doubt about any note they played. One was Louis Armstrong, and the other was Aretha Franklin. Those 2 players, they're just so profoundly hit you right in the soul. There's no other way I can say it. You know?
That's why that's why the happiest playing I did in this town ever was the years and years and years I spent with Ernie Williams.
Oh.
What that was that. Ernie taught me something every time I went to work with him. He taught me something every time I went to work with him. His phrasing was, I stole his phrasing all the time.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I stole his phrasing all the time, and I know my friends who are jazz players, you know, are going to say, well, you know, this and that. He was a wonderfully interesting person to play with as an instrumentalist. He was wonderfully interesting because the phrases changed all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
His bending notes changed all the time. His ability to yeah. So yeah, it was just fun to play. It was fun to play with him. And he never put me in that blues constriction box.
Uh-huh.
If you listen to some recordings of me with Ernie, I was playing a lot further outside than most people think I was. If you go, but that's a whole other thing. You can catch it on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, and I would recommend that to our listeners. Well, the last question about the songs we're listening to, the other song you gave me was Georgia on My Mind, okay? And it has a very deep gospel blues influence, of course, which run, in my opinion, straight through American music, okay? And I asked this question to our friend John Savage, another sax player, in another interview. So I'm going to ask you kind of the same question is, what do you think it is about the gospel or blues element that reaches people on this emotional level, at least here in America?
It's a human to human contact that doesn't strongly depend on the whole technical stuff. It's a human to human contact. Hank Crawford could play one note.
Yeah.
Hank Crawford could play one note, and he could get me to think about that one note. You know, he could get the way the way he let a certain kind of growl into it, but yet it was still pretty.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Hank had that. You know, Crawford had that. And so I do this oldies show now. I'm kind of retired, and I like playing with the oldies show because there's a number of friends in that thing that have been.
It's a great show. I've seen the first half. I didn't get to the second half yet, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun,
and it's tunes I didn't play in when I was younger, which is kind of interesting. I didn't play those kind, and I do now. But I wanted to play that kind of tune in that kind of show because I deal with non-jazz audiences.
Yeah.
Yet I really do think if I'm on, I really do think I make some emotional contact with them.
Yes, and I completely agree, and I have said this, publicly in the social media arena. Go listen to Charlie Vatalaro, young sax players, if you want to get a handle on exactly what we just talked about, translating that excitement on a good night, because we don't always hit a home run every night. I can tell you how many times I reached for that altissimo note and it didn't happen, and abort quick. But so Charlie, I'm so glad that you took the time to do this interview with me. We could go on, and we will at another time. But before I close out today, I want to ask you. Thank you for being on the show. And my final question: do you have any upcoming project or plans that you'd like to share with whatever audience I can muster up here?
Yeah, well, I'm as you probably are aware, and maybe some people are aware, I spent a lot of time as a record producer, producing records for other people, other artists in this area.
Okay.
So I'm talking the oldies show into doing a recording project. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something with them, and then I have a group of standards, part of the Great American Songbook, and that's what my initial training was in. And I've got, I don't know, 18 or 20 cuts now. I'm probably going to edit those down into a small group and probably release, a standards album. I know I'm 25 years late releasing a standards album for everybody.
Never too late, man. We're always having fun here.
And I think that's what I'm planning to do. If I have the time and the effort that I can still pull up to the table here, I'm gonna try to do that. And I just want to thank you too for all the support you've given me over the years, and in spots when things were not great for me, you were always there to be helpful and supportive. And I can't tell you how much I
It's
appreciate that.
all part of the saxophone brotherhood. So thank you for being with us, and don't go anywhere.
I'll try not to.
All right.